Good evening, everyone. I'd love to get the pulse on the room before we even start and just get a show of hands on who are students in the room. People who are working in media next. Excellent. And people who want to work in media. Even better.
People who are working in media who don't want to work in media.
Maybe also take another pulse since what we're talking
how
about.
How many of you are in our Facebook?
Users regularly?
Almost. And Twitter? So you're welcome, unlike most events where they tell you to turn off your phone, you're welcome to turn it on. And Twitter. And I think we'll do #CENCOM, CENCOM, if you're interested in twittering about what you're hearing tonight, and we're going to go in later and read them all. I was once at an event, and I was in the audience, and they had the twittering, and I didn't realize that the panel up in front had a screen where they were showing all the twitters from the audience. And so I twittered that the moderator could possibly be the worst moderator in the history of moderating, not knowing that he was then looking at that. And of course, my name is right there. And the rest of the panelists saw it and started chuckling, and it changed the whole nature of the panel, and the guy has never spoken to me since. But there is a power to social media.
I've seen that also where they've actually, when that happened, they shut down the screen, which I thought was a real problem. You should let it flow at least. Also, since the nature of what we're talking about is media and the convergence of technology and media, I was curious of those who watch TV still on a regular basis, do you participate with TV at the same time as being on a social network concurrently? So are you watching TV and talking on Twitter or any of these social networks simultaneously with your friend groups? Smaller amount of people.
How many of you watch TV online on Hulu or ABC.com? How many of you still watch TV on TV? Anyone who doesn't watch TV on TV anymore? I wonder what that'll look like in about 5 years. Be interesting. Those are the challenges that the media companies, I work heavily with a lot of the traditional media companies and the traditional media brands, and one of the core challenges to them is they really don't have a grasp on what's happening to the traditional business models and how do they make that transition. They're so locked in to the models that have been in place for 50 years that they're struggling to figure out not just how do you move into the new, to take advantage of the viewing on Hulu and ABC.com or NBC.com or Bravo, wherever, or the sites like TV.com and Blip TV and AOL that are non-TV related. You were telling me earlier that of the top 10?
Well, I was saying the majority of the top 10 sites online for television were not networks except for the Weather Channel, which was actually the #1 destination for TV, which I thought it was interesting at the time. And we were also discussing, which I think is really telling, is how whether it's the network itself or the shows, that it's not just on air that people are affinity to that. So if you're, probably at the worst case example, but if you watch Gossip Girl every Monday night, a lot of people don't watch it concurrently with the show, or they watch it in other places. So it's harder for networks and specifically the shows themselves to show their value offline or across the edges, as I like to say. So if people are watching it, DVRing it, so 3 or 4 days later, how does that factor into dealing with the ratings and the advertisers?
And how many of you DVR programs or time shift?
Wow. People, anybody in the room, peer-to-peer users? We're obviously going to be an interactive panel here.
You're under arrest, sir?
No. But that lies the challenge of how do you show the value of the brand off air or off the traditional space, because people are interacting in different ways. The other thing that I've seen emerge that's really interesting is how, and I've heard someone use the term transmedia on this, but how do people interact with that show in many different ways? And I think Mad Men's a great example of that, where you not only have the show that airs on Sunday night, but you also have people, each of the characters on the show participating in social media. So each one of the Peggy Olson Twitters each day and so on and so forth. They've built iPhone apps so that people are interacting with the show that way. So you see all these different touch points to the consumer that are not just focused online, on traditional air or broadcast or terrestrial television.
The fascinating challenge, we're here to talk about the future of digital, and the fascinating challenge is that all of these applications, all of these opportunities are emerging, and I think we'll talk about social networking and community building first, but that the media companies that are bringing you the vast majority of the entertainment and information that you consume every day really don't have a vision for where the revenues are going to come from to support the investments that they make. And so while Mad Men may have numerous applications, they really haven't figured out how to monetize that. How many of you are looking forward to the premiere of the last season of Lost? Lost fans? Surprised there aren't more of you. There are 50 websites that are forward-looking for Lost fans that are talking about what's going to happen next season, what to be looking for, what to prepare for. Only one of them is a site owned by ABC, and of the 50, it's probably somewhere in the 40s in terms of the audience that they generate. There is virtually no revenue model around those 50 websites. One of them's on tvguide.com, another on tv.com, one of them's in Yahoo, and they're managing to integrate them into their ad sales. But there's virtually no business model that supports that kind of content out there at this point.
And, it's a disruptive time for media companies. So before I started my agency, I worked at a record label. I started when it was cool to work in music, and then it kind of turned like working for Microsoft at a certain point when they became the evil empire. And that's obviously when I exited stage left. But I had the rare, fortunate view of watching disintermediation take place from the inside and actually play out on the front page of most newspapers as you watched your business disappear. And that music was easiest because it was easiest to consume. So downloading a song was pretty quickly. Downloading an album now takes seconds. In the beginning, it took a very long time. Now television, same thing. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier to consume it in new ways. And you talked about the challenges of media companies dealing with that. And there was a legendary quote, which I really like, which is, you can't replace analog dollars with digital pennies, right? And what I'm starting to see take place, and that was a quote from Jeff Zucker from NBC, which was really astute because that is happening and it is being disintermediated, but at the same time, it doesn't happen overnight. Music, when you go from a physical replacement like in music to digital replacement, it's not just refitting racks in a store to go from LPs to CDs. It's a much longer conversion. And I remember the heretics at the time, because I was at the label, saying that your industry's over, it's happening overnight, but it took 15 years to reach that legendary tipping point of where digital sales of music was overtaking the physical sales of music. So these transitions of disintermediation and disruption take a minute. And what I've started to see, specifically in television, is because of the emergence of social networks and I think it'd be, actually, I'm going to pause right here and kind of frame the decades of technology really quickly, but the first 10 years was just about going online and publishing. You were able to publish stuff on the web, you were able to put up stores. The next 10 years is the participatory phase of the web, which you're all doing right now. Most of you are digital natives, you grew up with social networks, so you're participatory, you're playing around with different things. And as the participatory web is leading into what we'll probably talk about later, the live web or the real-time web, this is now affecting the first screen. So going back to the digital pennies to analog dollars scenario, there's a real opportunity, and this is the marketer speaking here, to use those networks to drive from one screen to the other. So because people are actively talking about what's taking place on television, and this is why I brought up how many people are concurrently playing on a social network while watching TV, your friends are talking about something happening, and the example I'm using most recently is Kanye saying, I'm gonna let you finish, right? And while he's saying that, everybody is writing into their Facebook statuses and Twitter statuses that, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that, and poor Beyonce, and this and that. But everybody's seeing that and is being driven to the first screen and going to watch it on TV because of just common interest. So as this period of disruption takes place.
It's actually a great example because he drew so much attention
Sure.
to that event, to the performers, and it's very comparable to David Letterman and what's going on with David Letterman, that the amount of twittering, the amount of Facebook updates, the amount of online buzz about David Letterman is actually boosting his ratings dramatically.
I actually looked, I don't have access to Nielsen data, but I visualized data as a business, and Obama was a guest, President Obama was a guest on the show 2 weeks prior to this, and the bump on chatter was nice, but when this chatter is like 6 times the order of magnitude of attention on that show and probably reflected in the ratings as well.
And it'll be a sustained ratings bump that he'll generate because people are always looking for that next comment or anticipating it. Your experience in the music industry, I think, is also particularly relevant because if we look toward what the future holds for the digital community across television and a lot of the magazines and a lot of the traditional media, I think it's very valuable to look at 2 industries, one being music and the other being sports. And music is particularly interesting because you can certainly look back, and Mark was at Sony, so he's better qualified to talk about this than I am, but certainly you all are aware of what happened with file sharing and Napster and the whole transition of music because of digital access and free access to music. But what's happening now is that the music industry is finding new business models built around live performance and using digital and free distribution to build a new industry built around Live Nation, concerts, merchandising, licensing, and we're seeing a real resurgence of live performances. And I think when we look into the future for what will happen with our traditional television brands, as well as some radio brands and magazine brands, we're going to see them develop new business lines around connecting personally with their communities and using social networking, user-generated content online, and future social networking to bring together communities in live, real person connections, whether they happen online, but I think also happening around events and happening around taking the brand out to the people and giving them personal experiences. So I think the opportunity for television is to look at digital and to use it as a way in the same way that the music industry is using it.
And take that one step further. So what if you are the IP holder and you're in charge of the intellectual property right, like a record company? 9 out of 10 times you're not participating in the revenues from the live side. More and more contracts are saying, I want a 360 deal and participate with the live side. But what was their opportunity at the point of disruption to figure out their new business model, which I also find very interesting because Ticketmaster is in the live business, right? Sony Music and Warner Brothers are in the recorded media business, so how do you not have them eat your lunch? So something really interesting happened is that they were very much clinging on to something that they couldn't hold on to, right? File sharing was going to take off. People wanted to share music just like when they were kids and trading tapes of vinyl or CDs or whatever, and I might be dating myself with that. But what really was taking place was people were so passionate about music, they wanted to have interactivity around it, like we're talking about in social networks. So the real business and the greenfield that grew in the differential that they failed to understand was there's a business in monetizing the interactivity around the media, right? So who did that? Well, MySpace came along. They didn't have a single band to their name, but they took over the music interactivity business and built a pretty large business off of it and sold it pretty profitably at the time to, I think, Rupert Murdoch. And
But does Rupert Murdoch have a business today in MySpace, or is that history?
I think he kind of, friends don't let friends use MySpace at this point. I'm only joking, but, there's a planned obsolescence to social networks.
How many of you are on MySpace? We didn't ask that. Seriously, don't be embarrassed to admit that you're on MySpace. How many of you have profiles on MySpace?
Okay. And use it regularly.
And use it regularly.
Qualify that. Not a legacy profile.
That's interesting.
So friends don't let friends use MySpace. I'll go back to that. And there is a planned obsolescence in that. So, but, I think he was very effective in it. He did great deals with Google and monetized his sale on that and cut $500 million advertising deals and things like that. So I think it worked out for everybody, but the lesson there was that there was a big green field of opportunity that the traditional businesses did not want to embrace. And someone else came along and understood that it wasn't the recorded media, it was the interactivity around it. Now, don't get me wrong, artists should be compensated for their art. Copyright is still very important, but understanding how to monetize it is changing very rapidly. So, how will that translate into television is the same challenge here.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting when you look at the whole world of social networking and communities. Second Life is, kind of gone the way of MySpace and no longer the hot category that it was. But if you talk to kids who are under 11, a large number of them are in virtual worlds. They're in Gaia, Club Penguin, Neopets, Webkins, and they are learning a complete new language of social networking than even the Facebook audience has, because they're engaging with avatars, they're pimping out their igloos in Club Penguin, and they're building personalities and profiles online and learning how to communicate in different ways. They're really learning how to communicate not just intellectually. We've all been taught to think before we act, and that the intellectual processing takes precedent over the heart or the gut in terms of decision making. Well, when you're operating in Gaia or Club Penguin or Webkins, you're really learning to operate with your heart and your gut first, and your intellect as either in balance or in third place. And as this generation under 12 begins to take over media, they're going to be much more engaged online. They're going to be much more comfortable building social community online and building avatars. And I think as we look toward the future of online in the context of media, media has to think about taking that Mad Men experience and bringing it into a place where people can come into that Mad Men world, where they can immerse themselves in the 1950s advertising business and become a part of it. And that generation, as they grow up, will be developing those capabilities and those media properties to do that. And that's a clear direction that I think we can look at. And in terms of the revenue models, they're going to be built not around the unique selling proposition and the intellectual response to why you should buy something, but they're going to be playing very much to the heart and the gut and getting you to join and participate and be a part of.
Those kids who are growing up digital, whether you call them millennials, digital natives. I named my agency Wired Set after those type of kids, the Wired Set. I might not be immersed in the Webkins world, but I had a very real wake-up call when I went into a store and I was with these two kids who were about 5 and 7, no joke. And they're looking at the Webkins on the shelf, and then I see them reading all the tags. So I'm like, what's up with that? And they were remembering the serial numbers on the Webkins to go home and put it in and take ownership of those things so they could Mac out their room. And I'm like, oh my God, these kids are hacking Webkins at 5, right? And I was absolutely befuddled and stunned by that, but it was a great learning experience. So picking up where you left off, so continuing with Mad Men, so all the characters are Twittering real time. You have all these touch points, but you're on the World Wide Web. So the show airs in New York and in America, in North America, and all the characters are interacting with their audience. The show is naturally syndicated to the UK because it's a big hit. Characters have stopped Twittering because it's off air in America, yet the rest of the UK is just embracing it for the first time, and they're all looking for that experience. So there's even challenges with windowing, character development, how do we bring them into that actual immersive world, or, dare I say the word engagement, but I think that's a good pause to talk about engagement, because it really is about how do you engage with a media property, a brand, an experience, and there's no real measurement tool set up for engagement. We grew up with ratings on television and CPM, banner advertising on the web, and engagement is very real. As you engage with something, if you look at the learning pyramid and what you retain, what you experience firsthand is what you retain the most, versus reading it and hearing it. So I saw a picture yesterday online that I thought it was part of a study where a guy did a study on engagement in real life where he had a staircase, it was actually an escalator on one side, and next to it was a staircase, but the staircase was like the piano and big, so it was the keys, and actually if you stepped on the stairs, you actually made sounds. Everybody took the stairs, okay? So they actually changed their behavior based on an engagement, right? And I see this day in and day out online, whether it's viral clips on video. I don't even want to do a show of hands of how many people saw the Ernie Anastas clip or any number of clips that take place online on a regular basis, but you're immersed into it and you're experiencing it firsthand, and I think that has real value.
And this idea of engagement and immersion, I think, is critically important to recognize as we look at the future of the digital media and the concept that media has to be immersive. If you look at the history of media, the analogy that I draw, it's a freight train. You package it up at one end, it goes down to the shipping room, which is the distribution center and the transmission towers. In the case of advertising, it gets packaged in and bundled into boxcars, which are programs or magazines or newspapers. And all that the advertisers or the networks or the magazine publishers care about is that it gets put together, it gets packaged up, it goes down to the shipping room or the distribution center, and it gets sent out, whether it goes by land, sea, or air, becomes irrelevant as long as it gets there safely in the way you expect it to, and then you measure how many people actually receive the product. And that's it. That's the end of it. We're getting into the boxcar now. We're moving out of the freight car business. We're moving into a business of engagement and empowerment, and where the audience steps into the media itself. And I think that's the single most important thing as we look forward to the future of where digital is going, is that you are stepping into the process. You are becoming part of the media. They're no longer just simply delivering it to you. Even a show like Lost, going into its last season, ABC looks at it and says, we have one more season. We bought it from the studio, and then it's not ours anymore. Well, they have the opportunity to make it theirs by saying it continues. It continues in an aftermarket. People are going to continue to care about it. They're going to continue to want those characters to come to life. And it's open. Anyone, you, anyone in this room, anyone at ABC, anyone at the studio, any of the talent involved, can go online now and say, we're going to pick up this story. We're going to become this character. We can continue this process. And there's no investment necessary really to be able to do that. And people will come if you're good and if you're interesting. It's no different than when Oprah says, I want you to read a book, and millions of people go out to buy a book. Well, you can go online now and say, I want to write about this topic. I want to be a part of this subject. I want to engage with the topic that Oprah's talking about or the book. And that's where I think user-generated content, which is a whole other topic we can go into, has an incredible future in the context of how traditional media embraces it and uses it. And if they reject it, and if traditional marketers reject it, which they're in the process of doing now in many ways, and if the government over-regulates some of the opportunities for it, which we can get into, it'll be one of the greatest losses in the history of media.
It then becomes loser-generated content, which much of it can be, actually.
But we should talk about the government and the FTC,
Yeah.
and maybe just mention the ruling yesterday that I think has a real
So yesterday,
importance.
the FTC put a set of guidelines together. Is anyone in the room a blogger? Okay. So you get something in the mail, a book, a product to review if you're an active mom blogger who actually likes to get paid for blogging, and you don't disclose this, you're pretty much subject to $11,000 in fine right now. And the law goes into effect December 1st. The guidelines came out yesterday. And the guidelines basically frame that if you are a celebrity and endorsing something, or you are an active blogger and you're not transparent in what you're doing, you're subject to these fines. And it's a pretty significant fine. If you're like an indie rock blogger and someone sends you a CD and you don't disclose that free good, and they're saying any of those things, a CD, a book, any of those things are are payment. So you're getting something for free is considered a
What
payment.
if you get a free sample in the mail and you write about it?
So I spent my morning reading the ruling. It was this thick. My eyes are still bleeding from it, pardon the expression. But they broke it down like this. I go to a dog store because I buy dog food all the time, and they give me a coupon, and I write about the dog food, no problem. I go to them, and they give me a free sample, no problem. The advertiser, but then I write about it really positively, and the advertiser used my endorsement as an advertisement, that's a problem. They will fine them, the advertiser, for using that as an endorsement. Now, if I'm a blogger and a marketing company sends me the free bag of like puppy chow, and I write about how much my puppy likes puppy chow, that's a problem because I did not disclose I got that for free. Now, I think it's well-intentioned, and I'm not mad at it, but it means that you need, as a marketer, to come through with transparency. And as a blogger and the blogger is not considered the press. So there's a challenge. I want you to review a book, and I want you to review the book before it comes out, so I need to send it to you, right? But I think the hurdle would be very simply handled by the blogger by saying, I got this book from HarperCollins. They would like me to review it. My opinion is my own. I will say whether it sucks or it doesn't. And, and they can say, this book was a big bag of hurt. I don't recommend it to anybody. But the reality is that they should be transparent in how they disclose that they got it for free. Now, a lot of people are up in arms about this already. If you actually did a search on Twitter, and FTC was one of the top trending topics of the day. So there are real challenges, specifically, the mom bloggers who get paid to blog, right? And they were in it for commerce. A lot of the bloggers I've always dealt with were in it for love. I'm a big, passionate person about music. I'm going to write about music.
And the extension of this is the bloggers who begin writing on particular topics, and thanks to something called behavioral targeting, companies can now identify people who are blogging about particular topics, twittering about particular topics, posting particular topics in your Facebook updates. And this information is now being organized, aggregated, and distributed for use by marketers so that they can target you more effectively with their advertising. Behavioral targeting. A lot of people in media consider behavioral targeting to be the single most important revenue growth opportunity for the future, that their ability to use information about you and your interests that they discern from your purchasing patterns online, what you buy, what you use, what you write about, what sites you go to, becomes fodder for them to be able to target messages and media more effectively to you. Now, I think Mark and I are two of the only people in the industry who think this is a very, very dangerous trend for the advertising business to look at that. Typically, I think when either of us are in conversations or panels of this type, we are the antichrists
Absolutely.
To talk about behavioral targeting.
How
So
many
we're on
people
friendly
are
grounds.
familiar with the term behavioral targeting? How many people fully think they understand the implications of it? That's probably a different scenario. So, and I still don't fully understand it, but what I do understand, and I used to run a site called hack.net, so I do have some hacker background and understanding of what can be done with data mining. But when you go anywhere, it's putting it into a file. And because they disclose it in a privacy policy, and this is even a better question in setting this up, when you go to a site and they ask you to sign an end user licensing agreement, EULAs or terms of services, those 500 pages of really fine typed letters, how many people actually read that stuff? 2 people in a room.
Sir, could you come to my place later on
Yeah.
read all of these
Bravo
things that I've agreed
for that.
to?
God
Yeah.
bless you. But
Say that again?
you're underestimating your price points. Lenny, can I rep you on that, actually? But a lot of these things will be very clear in what they disclose. We are going to track you, where you go, where you surf. So if you're at home surfing porn sites, they're putting it in a file. They're appending it to your credit card information. They're saving it up. And by the way, they reserve the right to sell it to somebody else. Now, behavioral targeting as a rule, in concept done right, opted in, I know what I'm getting into, I can understand that. So someone is very evident and very clear to say, by clicking on this box, we're going to do all of these things for you, and you're going to be able to
Opt-in.
Opt-in. Right?
Double opt-in.
And very visible opt-in versus the ninth page on an end-user licensing agreement. Otherwise, there's this giant dossier being prepared for you, which, I'm going outside to smoke, and you write that on Twitter, and the next thing you know, you want health insurance, and they're saying no. And we've all seen, or they're not saying no, they're saying we're charging you more for that, right?
Or you put down on your form that you're non-smoker, and we know you are a smoker.
And be very clear that they're all out there tracking everything that's being said for those type of things, not unlike...
Or when you were 18 and in college and you have a picture posted on your Facebook page of you guzzling the...
through the funnel
the
at the
tankard,
kegger.
yeah. And that's there forever, and it comes back to haunt you on a job interview later on, which is happening already.
But youthful discussion is one thing, and I think I could get past that, showing that if you have other skill sets and you've proven yourself in the marketplace later.
Or for some jobs in advertising especially, that is
That's
a skill set. That,
Mad Men is about smoking and drinking and sex, so you're in. But on the other side of it, you might not want that full disclosure, right? Or you might want control over it. So my position with behavioral targeting is fine, but I want to own my own metadata. So, Amazon's a great case in point. I might want to buy a quilting book for my mother for Christmas, right? But do I want to see quilting books every day when I go on Amazon? No. I bought it as a gift for my mother. Now, Amazon's one of the few places that allows me to go in and say, I don't want to see these ads anymore. That was a one-off. I want to go there. But our friends over at the FTC recently fined Sears and Kmart for a behavioral that's even past behavioral targeting, which was, you went to their site, they said, you want to take a survey? You said yes. At the bottom of those 9 pages, they said, oh, by the way, we're going to install a program on your computer. We're going to track your banking records, your medical records, everywhere you surf, everything on your computer. Now, will they ever sell me another pair of jeans or another refrigerator by having that data? Highly unlikely, but more important, as a brand, you need to make a decision to say, am I opening up a trust relationship with my consumer this way? Is this the way I want to start a relationship with trust? And am I going to develop a lifetime consumer that way? So going back to the transparency thing, if you come with transparency and you approach things in the right manner, I think that that's a much better business practice. And while it's heretic right now, and it's not the best way to position things for bigger companies that are using it, I think it's a much more practical and smarter way to approach it, whether any kind of brand.
And the key difference, that's a common thread in a lot of what we're talking about, is the difference in the traditional media world, which was you're not about your passions, you're about your eyeballs, you're about your viewing patterns or your reading patterns, and that's all that matters. And we're moving into I think the next several decades will be about your passions and your loyalties and what you're willing to opt into and what you want to be involved with. And that's the major transition that's happening in terms of the revenue models behind the support of media, which is very different than the media itself. The revenue models will be defined by marketers learning to, through opt-in and through your choices that you're making, to find ways to tap into your passions and your loyalties and get you to be loyal to them. So we'll see more sponsorships of programs as opposed to multiple advertisers and shows. We'll see companies that sponsor television, magazine, sections of magazines, sections of newspapers, and more importantly in digital, they'll sponsor websites, section of websites. And not just in that particular time with advertising, but engaging you off screen and outside the medium in the same way that Huffington Post now is taking Huffington Post and Arianna Huffington out to town meetings. And they're bringing people in who care about the messaging of Huffington Post and participate. And because it's Huffington Post, they're willing to come in to be a part of an audience or to be engaged or to be involved. And they reward those sponsors who support Huffington Post. Interesting conversations about Glenn Beck right now, because there are a lot of major advertisers who are saying we're not going to support Glenn Beck because of his politics.
Mobile in a minute.
It's our transition to mobile there. And now there's somewhat of a backlash from the conservative right that's saying, you know what, we're going to boycott those advertisers who are boycotting Glenn Beck. So people's loyalties on many sides of an issue are beginning to be the issue as opposed to just the ability to communicate a message to them.
Just closing out behavioral targeting, for my own edification here. If I was going to give you 5% off on all your Starbucks, but I was going to tell you I was going to collect all this data, and I really didn't even give you the scare tactics of behavioral targeting, how many people are willing to give up their surfing history and all the stuff that they do for 5, 10, 15% less on a product? Excellent. Wow, so there's a hope for a few of that. I probably should, again, painted a larger reality. If there was a survey that came out in the New York Times that was done by MIT and a couple other organizations, I think it was even Stanford, that said 2/3 of Americans are against it right now. I still think you start with trust and then you develop a quid pro quo with the consumer. So if I give you this, I will give you that.
Well, that's actually a great statistic, 2/3 against, which also means 1/3 is for. And I think marketers and advertisers and those who value the information can make some very big businesses around those 1/3 of the people who are. The issue is you need to give them the choice.
Yeah, and I don't know that they fully understand the implications. I mean, AOL released a set of data that they said was anonymous. So they took the usernames out of it, right? But they just released their search. Well, everybody searches for themselves at least once, right? So it took 5 minutes for people to place everybody in that list, figure out who they were, and it turned into what was called the AOL data Valdez, right? So this information is really not that anonymous, but I do think there's an opportunity to do it right. So,
and even if it's 10% or the 5% of you who raised your hand, that's still a business. So I think the real critical thing is that we're going to increasingly get to a point where you're going to have the opt-in chance to participate, to get discounts, to get coupons in an opt-in way, and then you'll be able to choose at what level you distribute more information about yourself to those parties. And the more you're willing to disclose and divulge, the more benefits you'll get. And that becomes a major part of the future of marketing, is that relationship that you have and how free you feel and how much trust you're willing to give to those companies and those media groups and others who are asking you for information. That becomes a major part of the future of digital communications, is that dissemination of your personal information and your choice of how you distribute it. By the way, you have questions, raise your hand, because this should be as interactive as possible.
Oh, just a minute. I just want to say, please give your name and where you go to school or what you do, and just limit it to one question, please.
and all your
Thanks.
personal identifiable information.
Yes,
Let me
and
quickly, and we need to use the microphone, otherwise we won't.
got it, okay.
Hi,
Thanks,
my name's
Catherine.
Gloria Bono Daly, and I'm actually a founder of allthingsdigitalmarketing.com. It's new. My background, I started out at CBS Records, so I'm familiar with all that. I worked in magazines. And
I have
I'm
the
so
iPhone.
passionate about digital marketing. But my question is, when do you draw the line? And years ago, I'm not sure if you recall, there was a study done, the Tulsa, Oklahoma study. It actually measured how many times people flush the toilet during TV commercials. And this was heavily used by advertisers back in the 80s because I was working in research. And it was just amazing. But my point is that I think the purpose of the internet really is not to find out all this personal information about you, but I really believe we have to draw the line, and where do you think and when do you think we should finally do that?
My take on it is that you own your own metadata. I grew up on the Well in San Francisco. It was one of the first bulletin boards. That's where I kind of honed my understanding of both community. And when I logged in, it said you own your own words. Now I'm an active Twitter user. I go by Media Eater on Twitter. And you own your own tweets. I'm perfectly happy if I own my own metadata, meaning like I want to be targeted like these gentlemen do, but I want to control what I'm targeted over. So
Yeah,
I think you have to have, the control has to be in the consumer's hands, not the advertisers.
Yeah, and I think we have a real challenge about the question where we draw the line, because that's really a question of where the government draws the line. And it should be where the individual draws the line and the power of the individual to draw the line wherever they want and not to be dictated to. So when you turn on your television set, that information is, if you have a cable or a satellite dish or Fios through the telephone company, that information is stored. When you make a telephone call, that information is stored so the police, the government can go in and get telephone records. We've all accepted that for as long as we've been alive, that the fact that there is aggregation of data about our personal choices. The question is, what's the use of that and what's the freedom of the telephone company, the television company, the cable operator, the satellite operator, the digital companies to share that information in some way, whether it's attributed to you or not. And I don't know that it's like trying to control, file sharing of content. I think the horse is out of the barn on the fact that information is going to be stored, it's going to be available. I think you have to be able to dictate, and you have to make the choice of giving up certain things that you might want if your issue is retaining your complete privacy. There's a...
Okay. My name is Herman Mazard. I'm adjunct professor of innovation at NYU Poly, and I'm the CEO of Home Shop Technologies. We do digital grocery lists. And my question has to do with our ability to turn off the monitoring. For example, there's the ability to turn off third-party cookies on your browser. And will that functionality go away as we start using more and more of these mediums? Or will the government mandate that there has to be a way of turning it off? We have natural protections. For example, if you go to porn sites, then you should also go to church sites from time to time. And that way you can fuse the data, and so you can eliminate.
That's probably the best advice we've all been given today.
Right after you go to Girls Gone Wild, go right to church. No, but there's
But shouldn't there be protections built in? And isn't that something, if government is going to have a role, that it should, as we give up a little bit of privacy, that in order to retain it, then certain mechanisms
Feature
should be
sets,
put in
yeah.
place?
Well, there's a lot of fallacies around that itself, and pardon the pun. But the reality is that, like, I have Firefox. I set my cookies to accept it during the session, and then when I close Firefox, it should delete them all. But they're cookies that are very persistent. They will go away, but they're stored, say, at Google, who's really good at this. So you've deleted it, but the next time you go to Google, it knows your IP, it puts it right back on your machine. There's all this flash cookies, which are not regulated by that. So the more you understand technology, and it's a bait of my existence because I do, the more you realize that even though you might think you have controls, you don't have those controls. Now, the FTC is looking very seriously at this right now, and considering where they just came down on fining bloggers at $11,000, I'm hoping they'll take the equal critical eye and empower the consumer. Because if the internet has done one thing with media and the consumer, it's empowered them. I mean, I see it day in and day out. I mean, I can remember monitoring Twitter, and we have a free web trending service called Trender that allows you to track things anonymously, not you, but the media. And I remember I was tracking the term Motrin, and I watched a bunch of moms on Motrin respond to a viral campaign that Motrin did. And it was basically a video viral campaign that taught you how to carry your baby. And the moms got pretty upset about this. You're telling me how I should carry my baby, right? There's a vocal minority, 12 people on Twitter getting crazy about it. But it kept on mushering and mushering, and I remember seeing it and going, danger, Will Robinson, let me find who did this, let me find the agency. I called up the agency, it was on the weekend, they asked me what Twitter was. I said, okay, my work here is done. And the reality was that Monday morning, it was in the Wall Street Journal, okay? That's how quick these things happen. So, I'm a big advocate of listening. I don't need to know who you are online. I need to know what's being said, what the media's, what's taking place around the media. But what I really want to know is like a good understanding. And going into as a marketer, I can make really great marketing decisions with broad strokes of information on a regular basis. I don't need to know who. I just need to know velocity, how fast it's taking off. Is it a point of danger? There's a term, past links. How many people are flowing this link around? What is that velocity of information? What are they talking about? And then with that information, I have all I really need to make an educated decision. As a marketer, I don't just send out a message to everybody. I send it out to 10 people and 10 people with 2 different messages to see which one gets adopted. The ones that get opened more, I'll repeat that. So you do test and control groups and things like that. But you don't really need that type of granularity. And you know, that's the problem for me with it right
Did
now.
that answer your question?
I want to
Okay.
try your shopping list.
Then we'll move on. Okay.
Hi, I'm Ted Chachter. I'm a professor at FIT, and I teach creative strategies.
And you're $150 an
And I'm
hour.
$150 an hour. I do bar mitzvahs and weddings, too. But the question I have is, Google has a new product out called Google Wave,
Sure.
which allows simultaneous conversations. And Facebook, MySpace, all these things are still walled gardens like AOL was. Do you foresee Google becoming sort of the unifier and like to break through these walls so it doesn't matter what social network you're on, just to be able to communicate with anyone?
I'm playing with Google Wave right now. A couple of things I'd like to talk about with that. One is the walled garden. And the walled garden is draw a box, put you in the middle of the box, that's you in your walled garden, and this is everybody else outside it. Walled gardens are a failed strategy. I absolutely believe that. Going to Google Wave, what's really interesting about this is they have no marketing. They're not spending any money on advertising, yet everybody knows about the product. The
Well, I wouldn't say
conversation,
that, but
you know, well, a good
lot-
percentage of the people know
who
about
are
the product.
technology advanced
Yeah,
are,
the geek set, right?
Yeah.
And done right, Google Wave is, you know, in the best case scenario, it's to replace email, right? It's like instant messaging where you can bring other things into the environment. It's almost like a whiteboard, and you could bring in objects, you can bring in gadgets, you can bring in pictures, and you can share it with other people. The most interesting feature is when you view the public wave, and that's kind of where you're going to, is if you view the public wave on Google, it's just like Twitter on crack. It's just like,
yeah.
and you're seeing everybody's public wave go by. And this, for me, is where we're going, right? It's going towards these opening up
Think
gardens.
about a great way to think about it is if you go into your computer and you open up 5 different websites simultaneously, and each of them is independent and they don't interact with each other, but if you could touch one and pull something just from one over to the other, kind of like in an iPhone movement, and begin integrating websites and information on one into another, then you begin to get where the future of content distribution is going and messaging is going.
And innovation, because you're seeing Twitter drive Google, okay?
And Twitter drive Facebook updates.
Right. So what's happened is Twitter said, okay, we're the live web or the real-time web, wherever you want to go. And after you do the first 2 phases, we're going into this live web moment. And I want to double back on some of the things we were saying and how it applies to television. But Twitter's driving Google to open up really quickly. So they've done Wave, but this week alone, they now say, okay, we're now indexing everything by the hour. So you could, when you search on Google, you can say, okay, I want to see today, the last 24 hours. Well, 2 days ago, if you notice, they added another thing underneath it in the last hour. And they've also got a new technology called PubSubHub, which is allowing for any time you publish a blog post to be instantaneously indexed. So,
And the next step is that'll just be among your subsets, your friends, different groups of friends. What are your business friends talking about versus what are your non-business friends talking about, or what are the hot topics?
the fact that they got Google to move is unbelievable in my mind. It's like, wow, they are being disruptive to Google, and the live web searching is of equal value to the dead web. So if you search Google, it's the dead web, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's almost like the card catalog, if you will. It's got factual information. There's a little bit more authority in what they've indexed, so it's good. I just happen to call it the dead web. But the live web is ephemeral information that has of equal value in unique ways. And if you can see things happening real quickly, you see that. And I actually want to transition to a lot of what takes place on the live web is event-based. And I kind of see everything coming down to events. So, you know, when Kanye was talking on the MTV Awards and it went into Twitter, that was an event, right? And that event drove conversation, that put it that way. In TV shows, it's premieres, plot lines, what they're wearing, celebrities on the red carpet. Those are all events. Now we're seeing third generation social networks, like I'm a very active user on a service called Foursquare. Is anyone familiar with Foursquare in the room? Right? So I'm the mayor of all the best places right now, and I'm obsessive with it. So I'm checking in here, I'm checking in there. But that's place-based events, right? And that's unique also. And when you start to think that it's an aspirational network because you can earn badges. Well, A, I can become the mayor or something, and being a little competitive, I want to be the mayor, right? But then on the other side of it, I can unlock badges. So if I do a couple of behaviors, I check in 4 nights in a row, I get the Bender badge. And, you know, there's badges I can't even say. But if I'm a brand and I'm a network, let's say I'm a television network or a television show, and I want to create a brand like the Lost Badge, right? And the Lost Badge only becomes if you go to these certain places and you check in and you get the Lost Badge. But then how does that become monetized by the network? Well, quite frankly, checking into one of their advertising places, you not even knowing it, maybe not even telling them that because, again, you don't want to be the ringtone checky used car salesman, but you randomly check into a place that's an advertiser on that network and all of a sudden you've got that badge, right? Mm-hmm. So then you can almost even sell that to your advertising clients that you're selling the same on-air spots or your CPMs online. So again, events drive conversations. Conversations can drive you to the screen.
Do we have another question? Or, one here? Okay.
Hi, my name is Judy Martin. And Mark, you said earlier that marketing interactivity around the media will drive advertising, sponsorship dollars, things of that nature. Now you're talking about the live event. What do you think of Ustream? Is it good for monetizing a live program, or are you just better off posting a video on your blog?
I see Ustream as like live streaming video, right? I also see Quick, which is you take it with your cell phone and you can publish it instantly into your Facebook account. So Ustream, you know what Ustream has done for me? It stopped me going to conferences because every conference is streamed on Ustream. So when I want to go to a conference and it's $2,000 to go to a conference and I'm running a small business, guess what? I'm tuning into Ustream. And at the same time, I'm watching Twitter with the keyword. So I'm seeing what people are saying about it from the event, what people are saying about it outside the event, and I'm watching the event. So I've aggregated the real-time web to be my conference. And it's funny because I sent my head of business development to go see the head of Facebook speak during advertising week last week. And I'm like, you know, this is important. I don't want to go there. You should go and sign up. And it was like $65 or whatever. He goes, signs up, goes. And I didn't realize at the time that they were streaming it on Ustream. So I realized that before the event. I tune in. All of a sudden, I hear him asking a question. And during the conference, I'm like, hey, wait, that's him. But I was able to take in the whole conference, take in what was said, and understand the chatter around it, as well as listen to my employee
And of course, that
interact
takes
with
away
it.
the economics of the event.
Right.
So
How
where
do they
the econo-
monetize
How
that?
do they monetize what?
Well, well, a smart brand understands that. If you're the competitive conference and you're not buying that on Ustream, what are you thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Game over. Just take it and own it. Who's your daddy? We are. We're the other conference. You know?
Another question? Who do we have?
Hi, I'm Samantha Seaver. I'm a advertising and marketing student at FIT. You guys were talking about Ustream. I actually have a Ustream account. I love it. It's really easy for me to keep in contact with everybody I know, or I also have a YouTube account. It keeps me in touch with my subscribers. Do you think, since Ustream is still fairly new, do you think it's going to pop up the same way that YouTube did, and they're going to start doing partnerships, and they're going to like run those advertising clips at the beginning of each event, or how do you think it's going to go?
Streaming costs a lot of money, so I would imagine they're going to have to monetize it. I think it's a competitive field. For example, I don't use Ustream a lot, but I use Quick, and I have it on my phone, and it's QIK. And I'll go to a show at the Bowery Ballroom, for an example, and I'll just click on record, and I'm recording the show and broadcasting it live. But it's also connected to my Facebook account and my Twitter account, and combined I have 7,000 people on those things. So as soon as I hit live, I'm like Max Headroom on Network 23, next thing I know, I see my screen in my phone, and it says I have 400 active viewers for this thing. So I think that was such an eye-opener for me. In fact, one night I went to meet this kid, Jason Calacanis, who I used to work with way back when, and he's He's a very active online personality. And I went to meet him, and he said, I'm coming to New York on Twitter. I'm doing a quick meetup at a Chinese food place, right? So I go to meet him there, and he does quick video interview with me, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, me and him are seeing this, right? The next week, I go to present one of my new products, Trender, that tracks social media, at a New York tech meetup, and present it, and then I come back down, and all these people come up to talk to me, and they say, oh, I saw you on that Quick channel, and I'm like, what? How is this even possible? But there's audiences built in dynamically, so I actually would like to use that as a transition to say, I was talking about digital pennies and analog dollars. If you flip that around and realize that you only have to spend pennies in the digital world and you can move people and eyeballs, you can drive analog dollars. And I think that's the converse of this, is that as you start to comprehend the critical mass that's now taking place in the live web, you realize, oh my gosh, this is very cheap. It's very easy to interact with, and if you do it right, whether you're a brand, a network, a television show, you can take eyes from here and move them here.
The challenge to that, and I agree with that, and I believe we will see that emerging and bubbling up. The challenge is that the traditional media industry, whatever we may think positively or negatively about it, the economics of network television, whether it's ABC, NBC, CBS, the Food Network, the Weather Channel, CNN, their fundamental economics do not allow them to find ways to capitalize on those opportunities in sufficiently meaningful ways. And the economics that support those infrastructures are collapsing. And we're going to be going through 2 decades of restructuring where there's a tremendous imbalance between the need for traditional economics that no longer work to support an industry and an infrastructure that's collapsing. It's like, in many ways, like the roads and bridges and tunnels in the United States are, that infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. And we need to find ways to rebuild the infrastructure of the traditional media industry, the entertainment industry, the news industry as well. Newspapers being a very good example of that right now.
Michelle Greenwald. I'm a marketing professor at NYU in Columbia, but I worked for 20 years in marketing for consumer packaged goods and entertainment companies. But I'm struck by the fact it's much harder to be a marketer today. In the old days, the average, I think there's 20 minutes of advertising during daytime TV. It's a mix of 15s and 30s. There can be 50 ads in an hour going to consumers. The average women's magazine is 50% ads. Okay, you could reach consumers who weren't necessarily aware of your brand or interested. Now people have to opt in. So I think it's harder to reach people who might not be aware of you. And how much time does everybody have to spend with a brand? All these brands talk about creating a relationship with consumers. Most consumers don't want to have a relationship with a brand.
Absolutely.
How many, and how, so I just
It's
think
a great, yeah.
way fewer opportunities for a brand to reach a consumer.
The average supermarket 40 years ago had 20 to 40,000 SKUs, different items on the shelves. Today, the average large supermarket, suburban supermarket, has 120,000 SKUs. You walk into Macy's, you see how many different items there are on the shelves, how many stores line the streets everywhere we go, the strip centers. There's an overabundance of products in distribution. We're seeing it in the automotive industry. We're seeing it across all packaged goods. Tide is 14 different versions of Tide, 7 different versions of Coca-Cola. We're going to see tremendous consolidation across the board. Because we've overexpanded supply based on a constant increase in demand. Well, demand is level and is shrinking, and supply has continued to grow, and now we've got an overabundance of supply and diminishing demand. We're seeing the same thing in the advertising marketplace, where the amount of media options and the amount of media inventory has been increasing for 50 years, and advertiser demand has been sufficient to fill that supply. Well, now we've reached a point where there's too much media, and demand for that media is shrinking and changing. We've got DVRs, we've got all kinds of dynamics that are reducing the amount of demand for for all that inventory. So we're going to see radical changes in the nature. There is a solution, and this is a little bit of a segue that you're not asking, but there is a solution. Advertising represents 30% of the average marketer's total communication spend. The rest of it goes into everything from trade support to get store distribution, coupons, sweepstakes, incentives, different types of promotions, sampling, event marketing, public relations, public affairs, cause-related marketing. That's 70 cents on the dollar. The media industry does not do anything to go after those dollars. I think we're going to see increasingly media go after those non-traditional non-advertising marketing dollars, and that's where we'll see the funding for all of this new wave of media options that are being developed that are interactive in nature and allow distribution of coupons, allow distribution of samples, allow events to be built, and they'll be targeting people's passions.
But then you have Walmart, which is 30% of some brands that is pressuring people to spend their money in store, in media inside the store.
Right.
Inside the store.
And they're going to hold
Right.
on to that forever. But I think you're hitting on two other really important points. You know, it's an attention economy. How do you get the attention? In the music industry, 90% of the people didn't know their favorite band's record came out, let alone, you know, so they could go buy it, right? So there's the attention economy. And then I'm going to go back to my head of business development asking the head of Facebook the question, and what he asked is, okay, I understand everything you're saying, but what if every brand takes up what you say? Then the whole channel turns into noise, right? And then on top of it, you have this niche/fragmentation of the marketplace where mass media kind of goes away and everybody's in these niches. So you have all this noise problem. Okay, if every marketer is doing the same thing and saying the same thing, it makes all these services useless, quite frankly. And that's when you're doing it wrong, as I like to say. What you really need to be doing is understand your customer and enable them. Don't talk to them. Don't show up into a conversation you weren't invited to. Because half the marketers out there are like going to a party they weren't invited to and they have a gift. And they're like, no, you weren't invited. Just because you have a gift, go home, okay? And this is 99% of people's digital marketing strategies, right? Oh, someone said Pepsi, I can talk to them. No, you weren't invited into this conversation. And I'm very adamant about those type of procedures and what we do as a company. But if you understand that they are doing something over and over again, how do you enable that, or how do you bring value to that experience without being overt, you know? It's really hard. I remember hearing an aspirin company starting a skateboard park, and it was that whole Ouch campaign, I forget the name of the brand, but they didn't name the skateboard park, but they built it, right?
But you forgot the name of the brand.
Well, I knew the name of the brand. I didn't want to give them airtime right now. But what I liked about it is that they built a skateboard park, and they didn't say what the name was, and the word of mouth came back to say that was who did it. And that was much more a great experience. Or these pay-it-forward experiences, people buying tickets for the person behind them in the movie line, or you go through a toll booth and that was just brought to you by something. Enabling an experience, I think, is a bigger strategy than showing up to a party you weren't invited to.
I have a question for all of us that's political in nature, but it relates to the healthcare debate and the use of media and the power of media in communicating an agenda, and how little, going back to our conversation about behavioral targeting and disclosure and FTC regulation, shouldn't there be some regulations when research is distributed that purports to represent a particular point of view but is funded by an insurance company, or when advocates who are spokespeople on a television network are actually lobbyists for particular points of view, yet a lot of that is never disclosed. Yeah. So why are we, as a country, why is the government targeting marketers and mommy bloggers rather than some of the issues that are truly affecting our country?
They touched upon some of that in the most recent ruling, but not in any of those areas. Or why are we using technology better? So if we have a bill on healthcare, put the whole thing online and let anybody annotate it. So granted, it's going to be a UI nightmare, and how do you get all these
Create a
comments
wiki
and-
of the healthcare
Yeah, but
bill.
if you see a Flickr photo and people draw little boxes around it and write comments, there's no reason the country can't mark up that bill, right? And someone can weigh in on the sentiment and the intent of what those markups are and now those annotations are, and then take into consideration those things. So I think both what you said, as well as the fact that we're really not using technology the way we totally can, are both things that are opportunities. And those are the green fields I talk about. People who do, we understand that. There's a differential with the business doesn't understand that. There's an opportunity for someone who does to create a business there.
We have the mic over, we have
Hi.
someone back here. Hi.
I'm Joan Titleman. I am in business development for WENN World Entertainment News Network, celebrity content provider, paparazzi, red carpet, stories. But I've been in the business since MTV launched in ad sales and also in the internet since 2000. And I can't tell you how many topics you're hitting, and I think every one of those topics could be a very long discussion in and of itself. But I really got concerned when you talked about Google Wave, which honestly I'm not familiar with. But I deal with copyright issues every day. I was late to the seminar because I was dealing with a copyright infringer who had stolen a photo of ours from one of our subscribers. And instead of this person who committed an illegal act just being forthcoming, he kept sending me notices how I have to comply with this law and I have to do this and I have to do that to prove that it's ours. So I am very concerned when you talk about the live internet and people are going to move content around from one place to another. Who's going to protect?
What's your first name again?
It's Joan.
Joan?
Who's going to protect the people who have the copyrights?
I don't think anyone's going to protect the people with the copyrights in the future. I think that's an issue that the copyright owners are going to have to figure out how to get over and find new business models. It's unfortunate, but it's true that the vast majority of people who are growing up today and have access to content are going to continue to find their ways around copyright laws, and that copyright laws are an anachronism that are no longer relevant to where the world is going. Now, there's something called Creative Commons, which is a replacement for copyright that I think is a more logical use. But fundamentally, and I don't necessarily agree or disagree with what I'm saying, but fundamentally, I think copyright is an outdated concept.
Can I ask a question? Did you put that photo online on a website? Okay, so that's even more. I mean, I think if you're putting it up on a website, you're pretty much saying, eat me, right? Take it, use it, do what you want with it. And I don't think that's necessarily right, okay? But at the same time, if it was like, like Wire Image is another service, and you have to log in and have a subscription to get access to that photo, and they had a very visible lawsuit with Perez Hilton at the time, who was taking their photos regularly and defacing them as only he can, and they had a very legitimate case. So there's a lot of complexities, but it's a whack-a-mole game, and the more we can figure out either how to monetize it in new ways, like he was talking about branded content where it's not a bunch of advertisers, it's one advertiser, and they're enabling either a show or an experience. So it's very challenging. I mean, I look at television and I like highly scripted, highly valuable television with great production values. Same with music. I can make music in my bedroom and put it online. No one's going to care. I like highly produced, well-written music as well. So it takes money to do that. But at the same time, we're seeing new stars emerge. I mean, you see these kids on YouTube publish their user-generated or loser-generated content, and this guy Fred, who talks really fast, has more followers than 99% of the stars on network television, and he's monetizing his brand in a new way. So it's tricky how you're going to do it, but I think people want highly produced stuff, and when it gets stolen, it hurts.
David Letterman's announcement last Thursday, CBS told YouTube to take it down, which they did, and CBS took it off their own site. But in the meantime, there are 30 other places you can find it. So what they've done, it was out there, And CBS now has no control over the distribution of it. And what they've done is remove themselves from the potential revenue opportunity that might have given them had they left it up and brought people to themselves instead of forcing people out to the viral universe. How many have seen the dancing Beyonce baby? On YouTube? Well, if I was Loves or Pampers, I'd go find that baby and say, all right, I'm going to now take you and create some new content and make a commercial around you and find ways to monetize that. And if I were that person's parents, I might be interested in doing that.
But,
So-
what you just said is really the challenge, right? It's how do you capture lightning in a bottle? So that, when Kanye said that thing on the MTV Awards, it was on YouTube quicker than you could say boo, and in 1 minute had 500,000 views. Now, do you strike a content deal with YouTube right up and start splitting that revenue because it's lost revenue? And the Letterman case was even more interesting. For a while, they were doing a find and replace. So they'd take it down and then put up a new show promo. So as someone watching that, I'd be like, man, are you kidding me? Like, you're really doing
Screw
this to me?
CBS.
Yeah,
You'd be pissed.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
It builds brand hostility, right? So figure out a way. If there's demand, there's business to be had. Fill the demand. It's like bandwidth at home. They want to lock down my bandwidth. Thank God for net neutrality bills, but if I want to use more bandwidth, charge me for it. I'm willing to pay, right? But instead they want to restrict it. So again, seek demand, fill the demand. Don't fight it, because you're not going to be able to fight it ever.
Yeah, question up here that someone's been, and we have up here after that, okay?
Yep. Hi, I'm Russ, student at FIT for advertising. I'm also a social media marketer for Spill.com and Hollywood.com. And a lot of what you were talking about has to do with negative publicity due to Kanye West, Letterman, Motrin. And it's actually been proven right after the whole mommy blogger thing, Motrin sales went way up. So I'm thinking it could actually be a good thing to target demographics that hate your product, get them to say, we hate this product, and then there'll be more people hating on them like, you know what, I'm going to buy this product because these people I hate it.
It's funny, when he was talking about Foursquare, I was thinking, what about if I put all the people I don't want to be anywhere near, and I see where they are so that I can go someplace
And
different.
I think that's really key. Like, when I started thinking about location-based stuff, I started a service called What's Up New York City, and the whole premise was that I want to eat in my restaurant, and I want to send everybody across the street because I don't want to know where they are, right? But going to your strategy, I've used that for keyword buying for years. If you're selling a disco record, if you're selling a metal record, buy disco socks, right? But the first experience I've ever had with this was I put up one of the first bulletin boards for a music artist. I think it was like Toad the Wet Sprocket at the time, okay? And the first post on it was, you guys suck so bad, da-da-da-da-da-da. And the next thing I know, I have the president of the company saying, take it down, censorship, okay, damaged position. That band saying, take it down as well. And then the manager calling me, threatening my life. And what I did was I said, no, no, and no. And what happened was just what you said. 2 minutes later, the fans, the brand advocates, took ownership of the community, flamed that kid to dirt, right? He went away as the troll that he was, and they took over the community that they had. So it'll at least elicit the conversation that could be positive for those brands. But I think the girl who Kanye made fun of record sales went higher up than he did. Yeah.
And then plus more people started watching. I didn't plan on watching the movie at all.
Yeah.
As soon as I heard it turned on, I'm sure they came.
Huge, yeah. And they
And
monetized
did you hear
it
about it
online.
through social media or a friend? Yeah, of course. And then 17% of their ratings were up for year over year because of what just happened with what you did, what happened with you.
Hey, my name's Peter Hine, and I work for a medical device company, specifically orthopedics. So the question I had is, given the amount of government regulation, we work in communications, I forgot to mention that. We find it difficult to make the leap into social media to engage healthcare providers and patients. And do you see an opportunity in this arena? And if so, how do we break through regulations to utilize these tools?
Do you want to go first? Or?
You're dealing with a lot of regulatory issues, obviously, but the answer is yes. And again, I think it's developing communities. There are huge opportunities in companies like WebMD and others that are focused, that are targeted to patients and that provide insight and information on medical issues and that you can sponsor, that you can support, that you can develop, engage them to develop social communities around. The healthcare and wellness industry is probably one of the greatest opportunities because there is so much need for personal sharing. And I think there is a lot of it already going on today where if people have symptoms, they go in and they find others in communities that have symptoms. Meetup.com, one of their biggest areas is bringing people together who have common medical issues for conversation. I think if your goal is to sell your product or sell your service or communicate your particular point of view at the expense of other points of view, then no, you're going to have a lot of problems. If your goal is to facilitate, support, and help underwrite dialogue, communication, and community, yes, I think you have tremendous opportunities.
Well done, I'm going to leave that there.
Okay.
My name is Tracy Sweet. I'm a master's student at NYU in the Visual Arts Administration program, so the other side of the coin here. But my question is for those kinds of organizations that are nonprofits that may not have the resources of some of these other companies. How does a company like that stay in the loop of what's the next thing if, you know, Facebook is gone and what's coming next? And so how does one do that with a limited budget?
Well, that couldn't be a more important space for you to be playing in. I forget her last name, but I'm somehow following on Twitter a girl named Beth who's in the nonprofit space. She's a very clear thought leader. She's not only sharing everything she's doing, but she is connecting the dots to other people and enabling them. If you get in touch with me, I'll be happy to, point you to her. But there are great thought leaders out there that share. And that's what I find really amazing about the participatory nature of the social web is that people share. I'm a massive sharer. I bookmark 20 stories of interest every morning before 7 a.m. and distill the value in them. I share what the insights I have all day long through Twitter. So find the person who's the thought leader and follow them, and they will point you in the right directions, for sure.
I think we're going into a golden age for nonprofits because marketers are looking for better ways to communicate with passion groups, and there's no better place to identify passion groups than the nonprofit organizations they belong to. And again, I think if they do it for their own self-serving purposes, it'll be a problem. But if any marketer that has a natural, relevant tie-in supports the nonprofit organizations that their customers and potential customers believe in, then you have a loyalty to those marketers. And it's tough connections to make, but I think through digital media, we're going to see those connections being made up. There are a number of organizations, a group called socialvibe.com, that basically enables every time you purchase a product or view an ad for a particular marketer, you can identify how much money, which charities that marketer is going to make a contribution to. So companies like Coca-Cola and Unilever and Procter & Gamble have put millions of dollars aside to funnel through groups like Social Vibe, so that simply by going into Social Vibe and saying, yes, I'll watch these commercials, or yes, I'll accept these coupons, money is going to your favorite charities. So I think we're connecting up the dots between marketers and nonprofits.
I would also check a site that just launched called Challenge Post, where they'll pay people to come up with the solutions for problems, and another site called Tipping Point, which I really like, which is someone says they want to do something good, and everybody chips in, but your money doesn't go in until everybody has enough money to actually make it happen. So you commit, but your dollars don't go in until it actually can become real, which I really thought that was a great concept.
And for all of you on Facebook, you've probably seen that when people have birthdays, now you get the message that says rather than send them a birthday greeting, do their
Don't call a
cause,
sheet.
contribute to their cause. So there's the cause application in Facebook. Something bothers me about that personally, because they're done. My birthday's coming up, and every day, your birthday's only X days away. Make sure you give cause to support the cause of your choice, as opposed to getting birthday greetings. Well, I kind of want birthday greetings
me too.
personally, but
I like that love, right? He also touched upon something called Meetup, which is, I think, a lot of what's going to start taking place, which is where the world online starts to converge with the place world, right? So Foursquare was an example I said about that, but Meetup's another example where like minds can get together and have conversations and bring it back down to the real world. And it's really a small world. I'll give you a quick example of how small the digital world meets the physical world. I was flying out to the West Coast last week on a flight to San Francisco, and I'm on Twitter, and I follow 666 people. I keep it to a number, and anytime I want to follow, I delete someone of lesser value to get a better signal to noise ratio. So one day, I'm on this flight, and I see a number, I see a post saying, anyone going SFO to New York to SFO? And I write, it was by Danny Sullivan, who's one of the biggest search bloggers out there. He blogs about Google regularly. So I take it one step further, and I write, I am pound AA flight 191, and then I did a space, and I said, flight 22J. 2 seconds later, the guy behind me taps me on the shoulder. I almost had a heart attack. We both were like, oh my God. The people sitting around us was like, what just happened? But the reality is that it's really a small world, and the more you communicate, the more you find people of like minds, and you can play in sandboxes you want to play in.
how are we doing? Any other questions? Let's get the new question, and then we'll come back to you right here.
I'm Joanna Bono. I'm an advertising and marketing major at FIT. With behavioral targeting, how would a marketer, how Google logs all of your searches, how do they differentiate between multiple users on one server or on one computer? Or is it not important for them to do so?
It's a good question. I mean, you're logging in with your own name and your own identity.
What if you're on one computer? Is
What?
it important for them to differentiate between
It is.
different users?
If it's coming from the same IP address, it's probably more complex, but I'd say there's a lot of great
Yeah.
scientists working on things like
There's
that on a
also,
regular basis.
there's something called assumptive marketing. So it's the same issue that television networks have with the rating system that has a box in the home. So that box is in the home, you turn on the television, they don't know who's watching that television set, whether it's the man, the woman, the kids, the grandmother. But they do it by assumptive analyses of certain programming is more likely to be viewed by the woman, certain sites are more likely to be visited by a younger person. So if in fact that were an issue, they would do it by figuring out who you are based on what your actions are.
Two really great examples of that in the last 2 weeks was, and both of these are scary, but when you think about it, and Facebook, you may make everything private, but your social graph, your friends are public, right? And MIT did a study this last week that said that they can look at people's social graphs and determine whether you're gay or not, okay, just by who your friends are. On top of that, when you really think about it in practicality, if I'm looking at my social graph and the people around me, well, they're all the same age, so this guy's probably about that age. Some of them are these religious denominations, so he's probably this religion, right? So this assumptive thing is very, very precise when you come down to it. And you don't realize that privacy for me is your ability to negotiate. I'm not all about hiding anything. I really just want to be able to negotiate. And if you know everything about me, I can't negotiate with you. But people also think is privacy of what you say. And it's not only what you say, it's what you don't say and what you do and what you associate. So you may say nothing, but have a bunch of friends, but those friends are revealing more about you than you think you know.
How many of you watch
it's interesting.
Entourage? Well, in the season, Turtle and Jamie had a relationship with Jamie Lynn Siegler, and she outed him because she saw that he got a Facebook friend from a classmate at UCLA. So it's changing the whole nature of relationships too, based on, who your friends are and, the public nature of everything you do and say and think and where you are and how you act, and that information. We're talking about it from a marketer's point of view, but it also comes down to your own personal life and what your parents, your friends, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife can look at and see as well.
On the positive side of it, there's a lot of high school sweethearts reuniting 30 years later because they are finding themselves on Facebook and classmates.com. And so I've seen a lot of very nice little love stories. There's a small violin playing right here.
Did we have a chance to come back to this one last question here, and then, or are we out of time, Catherine? Okay, two more, one here and one here. Okay. We need the microphone.
You got right to your right or left.
Sure, thank you.
Left.
I just wanted to touch base on something you were mentioning before about how difficult it is. Hewlett-Packard was having a problem, and what they did was they did a contest, and they ended up now gaining their market share on selling their computers. It happened, a lot of students responded to this contest, and the market share was phenomenal, and now, they're known as the new, in other words, the younger generation is now buying Hewlett-Packard computers again. And they did that by a simple contest. So getting back to you, I'm thinking maybe they have to start thinking of the participatory streams of revenue to help them.
Yeah,
Ford is doing that now.
there's going to be a lot of, and get back to the gentleman,
Sorry.
there's going to be a tremendous amount of that in the future, not just contests, but I think through mobile applications where you're going to be given multiple opportunities to get instant coupons, to get samples, to get things free that you can then through your cell phone, mobile technology, take in and do transactions.
The challenge there is doing it elegantly, because if you think about the amount of Starbucks in the city, and if every time you drove by one, they hit you with an offer, I'd probably burn one down by the time I got uptown. So how do you do that elegantly?
Last question.
Sure. Hi, my name is Marlon Curry. I'm a student at Fordham University in New Media Relations. And my question is, with the big trend of all these social networking sites, I'm a big follower of Facebook, but certainly not Twitter right now. But with all the boom of social networking sites, what do you think is the biggest success for them? Do you think it's the actual applications that you're able to use, like being able to, tag friends, or do you think it's the people that's actually on the sites, like being able to connect to Beyonce or Oprah?
I don't want to say celebrity connections, although that's aspirational and it's kind of cute, but I think it's connecting with friends and things that mean something to you, that has the real value. Things have to be meaningful, and if it is meaningful and it breaks emotional ground, again, I came from the music industry where the advertising industry only hopes to see emotional ground broken. Music industry, people are throwing themselves off stages, okay? They love it so much, they're like, I see it visually happening in front of me. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience because you're passionate, going to his words about it. If you can enable passionate experiences that break emotional ground, that's where value is. That's what means something to you.
And I think in terms of a total context of where we are today, in the continuum of transformation that we're seeing in media led by the digital revolution, if you go back 100 years to the transformation from the agrarian age, from the rural society into the industrial age, when people moved from the country to the city in order to build cars, and the oil refineries and the steel plants, we had a radical transformation. It happened from about 1890 to about 1920. It was about a 30-year period. If you count the digital age at 1992, which is when the first browsers were introduced, we're at a 15, 16, 17-year period in a 30-year transformation of our society, our culture, our world, from what I call, from the industrial age to what I call the relationship age. And I think the real answer is the applications that are going to have the most impact are those that bring people together and that create and facilitate relationships. And that's what when you look at opportunities going forward, they're really opportunities about where do the relationships come together. And as we look at the continuum, I think we really have to look at the fact that we're just halfway through this transformation in society. And this is the moment in time right now, this year, next year, the year after that, when the major transitions are going to be happening, and this is the opportunity.
We have time for one more passionate question. Preferably from a student. Does anyone have anything? Guess not. Okay.
Our work here is done.
Well, thank you, Jack. And Mark, it was so great to have Mark back after several years, many years. So I hope you'll come back again.
Count on it.
And we loved it. It was fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone,
Catherine.
for coming.
Thank you.